Hello. I'd like to talk about the Sam Harris Reddit and how it's basically an echo chamber. Basically, if you're not a true believer in Sam Harris, if you don't buy into the idea that he's almost completely right, if you're not a true fan, expect to have your thread deleted if you criticize him. I created a thread where I criticized him for platforming Charles Murray, and it was deleted. If you're a Sam Harris fan, you already know what this is about, because it was pretty controversial when Sam Harris chose to give a platform on his podcast to a race realist IQ scientist who has been widely discredited. Now, I looked up the moderator who deleted my thread, and it turns out that he is a race realist too. He's almost definitely a racist, and I'll get more into that later. But let's talk about the thread that was deleted. I have a screenshot of it here, and the title is Why Sam Harris Was as Wrong to Platform Charles Murray as Platforming a Climate Change Denier Would Be. Charles Murray is a conservative that hates government intervention to help minorities. The intent of the bell curve, his book, is racist, and the framing of the data by Murray is racist. Sam's intentions have become apparent because he chooses to platform just Charles Murray as the one racist pseudoscience peddler out of hundreds of scientists who have reached opposing conclusions on the subject of IQ. If Sam Harris chose to platform the one Russian scientist out of thousands who insist global warming is a hoax and temperatures are cooling, you would call him out, but you have a more blind spot. Now, after I posted this, I was hoping that there would be a back and forth debate, because no matter how provocatively I post, that's what I'm interested in, and I'm always ready to back up the things that I say, with evidence, with things I've read, with examples, because you see that for Sam Harris to put on Charles Murray is a lot like inviting a creationist onto the Waking Up podcast and then not pushing back on them, not criticizing them, not tearing apart their arguments very strongly. And that's what Sam Harris did. He was interested in that conversation, so he invited Charles Murray, but it seems to be the only conversation he was interested in, because he never put on any other IQ scientists who would have contradicted Charles Murray. In fact, it seems like Sam Harris bought into that premise hook, line, and sinker. That's why he says that, oh, well, this guy is an aggrieved individual. He's someone who has been unfairly prosecuted or persecuted by the left. No, Sam. It's just that scientists, when they do peer review, have decided, no, this guy's he's not right. And when Sam Harris was criticized by Ezra Klein from Vox, he got mad at that editor. He had a meltdown on Twitter, and then they had a back and forth email spat. Ezra Klein was very polite. Sam Harris was very combative and aggressive, and then Sam Harris decided to publish those private emails. I don't know if he got permission for this or not. It just seems to be a rather kind of shady thing to do, and something you would do if you're thin-skinned and you can't handle any criticism. And then afterwards, the fans didn't take Sam Harris's side like he expected. Because Sam Harris was thinking that if he published the emails, oh, well, then the fans will know why I don't want to have a podcast with this guy. But instead, the fans started saying, hey, you're in the wrong here. You should definitely put this guy on your podcast. So eventually he relented, and he did. Now, to be more precise, Ezra Klein was saying in the emails that, oh, I'm not actually like a race IQ scientist myself, but I have a long list of people you might be interested in putting on your podcast who are authorities in their in their field. They know this subject better than I do. They can counteract the claims of Charles Murray, and then you can have like a real open marketplace of ideas. You can have a real debate. But no, Sam Harris declined to do that because he's only interested in giving a platform to Charles Murray. That's the only conversation he's interested in. He's only interested in the one narrative that blacks are basically stupider than whites as a population, and this is irrefutable. And it's all due to their genes. There's nothing you can do about it. Even if you invest like a ton of money into trying to improve those schools where black communities live, into trying to bring up their living standards, don't expect equal outcomes, which is ridiculous because we've never really done that. We've never ended racism. It's still alive in America, folks. I mean, maybe it's a big shocker to you that people aren't actually as colorblind as Martin Luther King had hoped we would be by now. Anyways, the moderator who deleted my thread, I have another thread by him to back up the claim that he's a race realist. On the digital manipulation sub 6 days ago, he posted, "It is, in fact, different sexes, races, and geographical regions that have different IQ bell curves. That's science." And then and then someone contradicts him. And he's like, "I asked you to provide something that Sam Harris said that was egregious. You said Sam Harris said that there's scientific validity behind the book The Bear Curve. I showed you that, in fact, there is scientific validity about it. So what you said is egregious and, in fact, completely reasonable. I can't do this about any factual claim that you pose because when it comes down to the details, you don't have a leg to stand on." And then after that, the guy replies, it's not really important what he said, but then he says, "That doesn't mean that they are wrong. Galileo's conclusions were not accepted by the scientific community either. Do you know of any study that contradicts Murray's findings? No, because the topic is taboo. So you don't have any evidence for your claim that there is no scientific validity, period." Actually, there are a lot of people who have criticized Murray and how he collected his data and his interpretations of the data. Beyond that, there are other things that Charles Murray has written which are racist and which kind of give away the whole game. That's when the whole mask slips. You can look into those. I can talk about those later too. But at a top level, this whole conversation is just an awful one. I mean, you look at the Nazis and they were into eugenics and the whole idea that some races are better than others. Therefore, we should kill off some of the races. It's not a good path to go down. It's awful. We know how it happens historically, and right now we see what's happening right now when the racists are in increasing numbers killing African Americans, people who become white supremacists and decide to shoot up Walmarts because they're upset about the Hispanic invasion, and they've bought into this whole white genocide, white replacement theory that there's a conspiracy to replace whites with inferior, stupider, colored races. Because obviously, in their minds, having more pigment in your skin just makes you stupider. It's really a dumb thing. And then there's other posts that this guy has written, like, do you have evidence against the findings, of the bell curve? No. Well, then goodbye. And then someone says, oh, you, Sam Harris and Charles Murray and all the white nationalists, you all agree that there's scientific validity behind it. And he's like, guilty by association fallacy. Yeah, well, I mean, you can call these fallacies out as much as you want, these informer fallacies, but I'll just say fallacy to you, because association does often reveal a lot about someone. And then you can also look at the history of what someone has said and get an idea of what they probably mean when there's multiple interpretations. This is not something that Sam Harris is really on board with, but when people like Charles Murray say things, it doesn't come out of a vacuum. You can look at the other things that they've said, and you can conclude that they're racist. This guy, mind you, happens to work for the AI, and he's not really on board with the idea of social nets, of providing more funding to, say, poor African Americans so they could actually get higher IQs or whatever he's so focused on. Someone has told me that he has voiced some support for UBI. Well, UBI is basically a libertarian idea anyway. It's a band-aid on capitalism. Instead of reforming the corruption that underlies capitalism, you're going to give people a $1,000 or whatever dollar paycheck a month, just so that they don't starve and get mad and rebel and overthrow capitalism. But it doesn't actually fix the problem of there being too much corporate influence in our political system, and there being a need also for us to have more control over our workplaces, something that requires you to form unions and so forth, so that your CEO doesn't make 500 times more than you for pushing paper and playing golf. Now, there's other threads that have been deleted at the Sam Harris forum that I know about, because it's happened to me. I don't know if I'm going to talk about all of those. But I just want you to focus on one thing, if you don't believe a word that I'm saying, which is that you're only hearing one side of the narrative whenever these intellectual dark web people speak. They very carefully choose who they're going to have on their show. It's mostly right-wingers, or I should say rake-wingers, because a lot of them are like the, Nazi Germany. I mean, let's be honest. You take Milo, who Dave Rubin has podcast, and I mean, I put on his show the Rubin Report, and that guy is just a straight up Nazi. In conclusion, there isn't really an open marketplace of ideas within the intellectual dark web.